slaughter. Please enjoy.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is really weird. I have someone else's microphone in my hand, not my own. So anything technically a little bit weird, please give us a little bit of leeway here. Can everybody hear okay? Yeah? All good? Okay, well, thank you so much for joining me on this first ever live episode of Boulders Brass Podcast. It is an honour to have been invited, and it is more of an honour that Susan agreed to come and talk to me, because Jan has really hyped me up in a way that I don't deserve. Elocutionist extraordinaire, I think, is it's a stretch. You'll hear. Anybody had our show before? That is reassuring. Thank you very much. So, what we're going to do today is a slightly condensed version of our usual interview. We are going to hear a potted life history from Susan. We're going to then take a 5-minute intermission, at which point there will be a question box up on our Instagram at Boulders Brass Podcast, where you can then submit your questions for Susan as well, and then we'll have 20 minutes to answer them. So, Susan, thank you so much for agreeing to come and talk to me. You may regret that decision shortly, but we'll find out.
You go farther than I had to drive, so.
Well, I like to hear everyone's entire life story, if you don't mind. Can you take us all the way back to the beginning of your musical journey? What first drew you to playing music, and how old were you?
Well, the church I grew up in had a very active music program. It had a teen choir. Of course, it was helpful that one of the members of the church had 9 children. All of them sang very well. And also we would have something called revivals, and they would bring in like a song evangelist, and that person would often play the trumpet or some instrument, but more often than not they played the trumpet. So as a young child I would hear this instrument, and I just loved the sound. And then another gentleman by the name of Raquel Samayoa was on TV. And yes, we had a TV on the farm. Of course, we could only get 2 stations, but anyway. So he was on TV, and even my parents took me down to the state fair in Indiana. I grew up in McCordsville, Indiana, which is just outside of Indianapolis, on a farm. They took me to the state fair because Raquel Mendez was playing. And so they had some knowledge, even though they were farmers. My mother went to Indiana University, so she was educated. My father was extremely smart and kind of regretted settling for farming the farm and not going and doing something more with his life. But anyway, he was a very smart guy. And I think that they saw I had an interest, and they tried to feed that interest and encourage that interest. But the only problem was we didn't have a band in my school. We didn't have any music program. So I was 10 years old. They hired a woman teacher and director. So immediately had a woman influence me in terms of, you can do music, that's what you want to do. So she invited, it's kind of like the movie Music Man, I think it is, would invite the distributor to come in and put down his wares. And my parents said, well, let's go, what do you want to play? And I looked at the trumpet, probably was a cornet in those days, because that's what I started on. Pointed, I want to play that one. I don't even know if I knew what it was called, but I recognized the image. I want to play that one. And so, a few weeks later, they delivered the instruments to the band and to the group and showed me how to put the instrument together. Really hard for us trumpet players. So I got off the bus. We had a long lane up to the farmhouse. My dad was in from the field. He would fix dinner. Mom would come home from work, and we'd eat together, and then he'd go back out to the field. But anyway, so I carried the instrument in, I put it together, I walked into the kitchen and handed it to him. I said, how do I play this? And he said, well, I think you just put your lips together and blow. So that was my first lesson. So with the various band directors, sometimes they have other ideas for you, and interestingly enough, our junior high band director, the lady moved on to another job, and in 2 years we had a different person. And he was mostly a choral person, and he looked at me and said, don't you want to play trombone? So here I am. You notice I'm not real tall. So I lugged the trombone up the lane and got it out and tried to play it, and I thought, I don't like this. So I took it back. I said, no, I want to stick with the trumpet. So I don't know how much detail you want.
That's perfect, that's perfect. No, I don't know about the other trombonists in the room. Should you also go, oh, oops. So, was there a point at which you thought, yeah, I've taken to this pretty well, I quite like the trumpet, I'm going to take this a little bit further?
Well, I love music. The band director, we then consolidated. There were 18 people in my class in this little small town. We consolidated with the big town next door who had 4,000 or 5,000 people in their city. So suddenly our class grew to 69 overnight. And the band director there was an excellent trombonist. And he played in a band in Indianapolis called the Phillips Concert Band. There we go, Phillips Concert Band. And he would take me and 2 or 3 other players from our band, because we were all very good, and we would play with them. And the gentleman who played first trumpet in this band was second trumpet in the Indianapolis Symphony. So I had a lot of good influence there, not only from my band director, but from sitting and listening to this gentleman play. Now, you all have little tryouts and competitions in high school. I'm certain you remember that. So there were 3 of us in the same class, and we all 3 were of about equal talent. So I don't know if the young men went to the band director and said, I want to challenge Susan, who's playing first, cornet, solo cornet. So we'd have a challenge, so I'd practice. And then I think he would just appoint one of them, so the other 2 people would really practice hard. And then we'd say, oh, Jim wants to challenge Bob, I said, okay, well, I'll be a part of that. And so then he'd let Jim win, and then he'd come back. I said, well, I'm ready to challenge them. And then he'd let me win. So you could see what he was doing. He was keeping us working hard and challenging us, and then also taking us to concerts where we could learn to listen and perform with other musicians that were more mature than us. So as I look back, I was very fortunate, and really credit, his name was Bob Meyer, my band director, for giving me the opportunity, because in those days, women were mostly expected to get out of high school, maybe go to college, and probably get married and raise a family, and but nobody ever really said I couldn't do it. Mm-hmm. I know when I got to, are you ready for college?
Go ahead.
I'm getting too far ahead of her here. When I got to Indiana University, my trumpet teacher was Herbert Mueller. He had not heard me play. Somehow he was out, not available for the audition or whatever. So I go to my first lesson. He says, he was my counselor the first semester. He said, I see you've signed up for performance, but I really want to recommend that you sign up for education. Now, I'm pretty shy. I've learned to overcome that, but as a kid from the farm, I was pretty shy then. And I said, well, Mr. Mueller, you haven't heard me play, and can I stay in performance for the first semester? And if you tell me if I need to change, I'll change next semester. And I said, sure, we can do that. He never brought it up again. I just wanted to play my instrument, and I had fallen in love. You all know Tchaikovsky Symphony No. 4, that fanfare. I just thought, wow, I want to play that someday, So I'd fallen in love with that, and so that means I was really leaning towards an orchestral career. And very fortunately, I had the opportunity to play that, and there was a gentleman by the name of Louis Davidson. He was a trumpet instructor at Indiana University. His first year there was my first year as a freshman, and he had a repertoire class in the evenings, once a week. So I would go in and sit on the last chair and, play Don Juan, Till Leon Spiegel, all sorts of things, Einheld and Leben. And it was the greatest experience I could ever ask for, because he would give all of us the ways that the style, the way we should enter, the way we need to, you're going to be late there if you don't do this, lots and lots of great stuff. And now a funny story. And of course, Jerry tells this on himself, so I feel comfortable telling it. But he had a student in Cleveland who finished in the middle of the year. So he came to IU in January, which was still Louis Davidson's first year at the university. So I'm sitting on the last chair, and Jerry comes in. Jerry Sofer's his last name. Played third in the Buffalo Philharmonic for years and years. Sits down beside me, and he says, "Hi, I'm Jerry. Can you transpose?" I said, "Oh, a little bit." So he says, later on tells me, he says, "You blew me away. You left me sitting still here, and you were just down the road transposing, and you said you could only transpose a little bit." I said, "Well, a little bit." So, anyway.
So when you finished at college, what happened next for you?
Well, I was a senior at IU, Indiana University, and my teacher had access to like the international musician. Says, "You know, there are a lot of openings here. You need to write a letter of inquiry, and ask them to send you the repertoire and invite you to come and audition." And so I did, and he gave me all the addresses. There were about 30 openings. In those days, orchestras didn't pay very much, so you couldn't really raise a family, let's say, and play in a symphony without having some other outside job. So I sent out 30 letters. I got 3 invitations back: Milwaukee Symphony, North Carolina Symphony, Toledo Symphony. In Milwaukee, I took that audition. I think I played about the level of a junior high player. So I was on the plane flying back to Indianapolis and thinking, "What are you doing? You should have gone into education. That was terrible. Gee, I hope I can keep it together." Well, I got 2 more auditions. I'll go ahead and take those, and then we'll see what's going on. So in the next 2 auditions, I played significantly better. In the North Carolina Symphony, I made 1 transposition note mistake, and he asked me to play it again. I made the same mistake. But I went now and looked up that piece, and I never made that mistake again. But I did not get that job. I went to, and it was just a conductor in a room like this playing for him. Then I went to Toledo. I flew up there and played for the conductor and the personnel manager. Again, no curtains. And the Zarathustra, the call up to the high C, as you all know, he kept asking for that, and I played it for 5 times and hit it every time. And they finally asked for a 6th time. I said, "May I ask a question? Do you want something different? I mean, do you want me to do something with this?" And he said, "No, I just can't believe that you can hit it so many times." So, over my career, my goal was to never miss it, either in rehearsal or in concerts. And I never missed it, okay? Or recording sessions either, recording sessions. And the gentleman who was principal when I got to St. Louis, he'd play that call and miss it once in a while. And he'd lean over and said, "You don't want to think it's too easy." So anyway, I didn't feel like I had that luxury, because if I missed something, we're talking about late 60s, 1969, early 70s, and other than Marie, who was playing second in the Cincinnati Symphony, I was the first principal in a major symphony, starting around 73. And I knew then I could not miss. I could not mess up. And my thoughts were that I'm not going to mess up. So even if I pressed too hard to play that high C in Zarathustra, maybe even bruise my lip from time to time, I was not going to miss. And does that mean I didn't make mistakes? Of course I made mistakes. We all know the Mendelssohn, was it Fingal's Cave? I'm trying to think. And your first entrance on a high concert G sharp. Well, I've been doing something called Trumpet Lab, a week of intense 8 hours a day orchestra literature that we had like 5 or 6 gals and gentlemen too at my home, of all things. And we would read through as much literature as they could get through each day, rotating parts. And that when we got to Saturday, we had a morning session and then sent them on their way home. And that night, I had this concert with the symphony, and I had 2 instruments, my D on stage and my C. And I was so tired, I picked up the C, but you know, a concert G sharp would be an F sharp on your D trumpet. So I put my second valve down on my C trumpet, and I didn't quite play the correct note, and it was a loud entrance. So I was a whole step too low, but they didn't fire me. So that's not to say I didn't make mistakes, you know, but I think everybody realizes I was exhausted from teaching, so anyway.
I mean, we've breezed past something there that I don't know if it's knocked you sideways. First principal female trumpet in a symphony orchestra anywhere in the world. We can't ignore that. I think there's a lot to be said for the rest of us that we can all now go out and have jobs the way that we want to, thanks to people like Susan. So we can't overlook things like that. So I know we've had a little bit of a potted history there of orchestral playing, but when I get this recording back and it goes out live, it's going to be a little while down the line. This is currently being recorded live at the International Women's Brass Conference. I know the people in the room, you don't need to be told where you are. This is for the benefit of the people in the future. Don't worry, I've not completely lost my mind. But do you want to tell us a little bit about how the IWBC came to start and why and how it's developed in time?
All right. I was teaching in the Tetons, that's up in Wyoming, beautiful area, and it was a month-long orchestra seminar. The conductor would want us to play through things the first time as the principal with the students, and then after that, the students played everything. Well, there were several young ladies in, I think it was around 1990s, maybe 89, 90, something like that. And trombone, horn, trumpet, and they said, "Oh, do you know Gail Williams?" I said, "I've met Gail once. I mean, you know, we don't like chitty chat on the phone or anything. How about Marie Speziale?" "Well, I have her phone number because we had a directory of all the major orchestras in the United States. Major orchestra being an orchestra that had, say, a $20 million budget. That's how they define a major. Well, I've never talked to her actually, and I got to thinking, why is that? I'm not certain. She could have called me. She had her number. I could have called her, but we didn't. And I cannot explain that to you. So I got to thinking, and we were talking, brainstorming. They said, wouldn't it be neat if we could all get together, all women brass players? I said, that would be neat. So this idea was planted, went back to St. Louis, and I thought, how can I make this happen? So we talked about doing a survey, and these young ladies helped me. We came up with questions. I got directories from the Horn Society, the Trombone Association, and, you know, tubas, etc. And I looked through the list, and I marked every female name I could find, and with Lynn, it would be question mark, so I mark it anyway. And sent out 1,500 surveys to all these addresses. So that took some time, but again, there were people in St. Louis that helped me. When you do a survey, I am told by the St. Louis Symphony PR department, 3% return is a really good return. If you get 10% return, then that's overwhelming in a sense. If you get a 30% return, like we did, we got 500 surveys back, saying, let's say 490 said, yes, please try to do this. And maybe another 6 or 8 saying, oh my gosh, don't rock the boat. Don't do this. And then a couple just saying, no, absolutely not. So 30% return is a mandate, and I felt like it's something I had to do. So fortunately, our principal trombone was new, and his wife's name is Rebecca Stopp. She came with him, and she was an arts manager. She came up to me and said, I hear you have this idea. I said, yes. And she said, I'm an arts manager. Would you like to hire me? I said, yes, I would. So I paid her a salary to help me put this together. She knew all sorts of things like, well, first thing you do, you've got to incorporate, and you apply for a 501c3, you do this, you do that, you form your board. So if we're talking about 91, by February of 92, we had our first board meeting. By May of 93, we had our first conference. And all of that, a lot of that is due to what she's told me to do, and that she did a lot of the work. And then people in the community came out to support the idea. I started doing these concerts called holiday brass concerts. The first year the union let me allow the musicians to contribute their salary, so I didn't have to pay them. We did it at a small chapel called Graham Chapel on Washington University campus, and that was our first concert to raise money. So now we're talking about 1992. At the conference in 1993, we had about 300 people come. We had some people dealing with, like here, psychological, stage fright and things like that. Donald Green was the gentleman's name. And now there's a lot of Don Greens that have taken this subject and really helped to develop this. But people from the symphony came to the conference because we had something to offer that was helping them as well as helping us. Oops, sorry about that. And there you have it. We had our first conference. It was like, the only word I can think of is a revival service, because as a female in an all brass section, male brass section, you really didn't want to appear weak to them, so you really didn't talk to them about problems that you might have or were encountering. And I'm not saying that I wasn't welcomed in the brass section. I just had this image that I couldn't really appear weak in any way. So we invited them to come because they donated their time, and a lot of them continue, like this Donald Green I mentioned. Then several of them went to see him in New York and study with him because we had our conference there. So all of us could then talk to each other about our circumstances and challenges that we've had. And Barbara Butler, one of the things she shared was, somebody says, well, what do you say? Somebody comes up and says, oh, Barbara, you play with balls. And she says, and I look at her and I say, no, I play with vagina. And that was Barbara. Now, that's not something I could have said to somebody. But she could, and she made it funny, ha ha ha, and everybody laughed, and probably the gentleman who ever asked that question never asked a woman again. So anyway, but also we had some things about what's it like when you're pregnant and playing. Laura Olson had just had a kid, and she said, well, don't wait until such and such, because I left the concert and playing Mahler or something and went right to the hospital and had my kids. So, just lots of subjects that men couldn't really speak to, because how can you? I mean, I haven't been pregnant, so I cannot speak to that, but someone else here who has had a child could be very helpful in showing what it was like to play double high G when you're pregnant, or the lowest note on your instrument. So a lot of things like that, but the most important thing was being able to share, being able to meet people, because of all the people I met, I got to hear a lot of terrific players. Because in the back of your mind, some of you came here probably saying, will I really hear anybody that plays as well as I do? Just somewhere back in your mind. And then you go to these concerts and you listen to these players and you think, oh my gosh, they play better than me. So that's the way I felt. I'd found a lot of people who are equal level playing, and now maybe I could put together an all-female brass group. So that's how Monarch Brass got formed. Our first tour or concerts were in 1996. Then in 1997, we played the same program back at St. Louis again, because, it's an early enough conference that not many people knew about it. And after all, if you're going to invite them to your university, you don't want to take a chance of failing. There's only 300 people here. It's 300 people who have the right spirit, 300 people who have a positive attitude about accepting everyone into your area, everyone. We have subjects probably on in our program that would be uncomfortable for others to deal with. The Chromatic Brass Collective dealt with subjects that might have been uncomfortable for people in that audience, but it's subjects that we need to deal with. So we don't want to shy away from those. We want to make the world a better place. And how can we do that? We have to have a conversation. And we have to not just listen, we have to hear what's being said. So there's two levels there. One is listening, I hear you, but what am I going to say back to you? So you're not really listening. Or maybe you're listening, but you're not really hearing. So that's what we want to try to generate here, the ability to hear. And all of the gentlemen who have come, thank you for coming. We want you here. And we hope that you're having a good time and that you feel accepted and that respected. And all we want back from you is respect and acceptance. So we appreciate you coming and showing that to us, and we hope that you felt it from us.
Well, I don't know about anybody else, but I'm pretty grateful that that idea was conceived 30 years ago. Are you? When Susan and I were liaising about booking this interview, she suggested to me that this sort of thing also needs to happen over in the UK. And she pitched it to me as something that I could do. Don't know that I can quite fill those shoes, but if anyone wants to come back to England with me and do something like this over here, you're welcome. Come with me. Come with me. So, out of everything then that you've ever taken part in, have you got a best brass-related memory?
I'm a little hard of hearing. I didn't understand the question. I'm sorry.
Have you got a best brass-related memory?
Oh. I better look at my list here. I think the 1996 Monarch Brass Tour, because it was all women playing together, we're all pulling for each other. There's no undercurrent of, well, let me tell you this story so that you understand why I say this. One of my students ended up playing lead trumpet in a group called the Fox Orchestra in St. Louis. And there were other people that probably I beat out for the job in the symphony. And he was telling Athena one year, I think it was around 2006 or something, when he was, Chris Jonas is his name, when he was a soloist with the band. And he stopped and told him, he said, you may not believe this, but he said, I was in this group in the Fox Orchestra, and he said, they talked about wanting Susan to fail. So, not wanting me to be successful as the principal trumpet. It's okay while I was fourth. I guess I was no threat, but anyway. So, why I say that story is that I always sometimes felt an undercurrent of not wanting me there. It's just the best way I can express it. Well, with Monarch Brass, we all wanted to be together. We all wanted each one to succeed, and we were all rooting for each other. And it was a totally different atmosphere. And from that point on, every opportunity I could get to play in an all-women's ensemble, I wanted to do. Maybe some of the male brass players played a little bit better than the female players, but I didn't have this feeling of just some type of undercurrent. I'm certain people in the military can tell you all sorts of stories. So, and that's just a total different area there. But, I'm not certain how to explain it any better than that. Just, I felt a part of the group. I knew they were all pulling for me, and I was pulling for all of them. So for me, that's the best music. There are other experiences. The orchestra went to Europe. Leonard Slacken was our conductor. And when we were in Berlin, he chose to do the Adagio for strings as an encore by Samuel Barber. And I almost felt like he was dedicating it to the Jewish people who had all passed because of the Holocaust. And that's the way it kind of came across to me. So I didn't have to play, thanks goodness, because I had tears in my eyes. So, but that was one of the most outstanding musical experiences to me, And I didn't even have to play a note.
They're the ones where you're winning. So, I like to bring everyone back down to earth with a bump after that question. Next question, I ask everybody to sum up in 3 words or 3 small phrases in the hope that nobody gets themselves in too much trouble. And this one is to tell us either your worst or weirdest brass-related memory. There are no follow-up questions, and I always throw myself under the bus first. So mine is an example. If you've heard my show before, you'll be pleased to know it hasn't changed. Mine is overhydration, Royal Festival Hall, no interval.
Trumpet lab, exhaustion, wrong trumpet.
Whoa. Well, there are no follow-up questions, so we get straight on to the next one. What's the best piece of musical feedback or advice you've ever been given?
Talk with your instrument. Don't talk with your mouth. You know, if I come in and, well, you know, somebody on sports, you know, they catch the touchdown or whatever and they start beating their chest. Well, don't do that. Just take your trumpet, make all your statements with the trumpet, and not try to convince people how great you are. All you can do is play, and that says enough.
Fair enough. I don't know that I could apply that to the podcast necessarily. Might be a bit difficult. Anyway, what is your favourite or least favourite piece to have played out of anything, any repertoire at all?
Anything by Mahler. I love all the symphonies except Symphony Number 4. We're sitting around too long. It's a beautiful piece, but I'd rather play Mahler 1, Mahler 2, Mahler 3, Mahler 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then the least favorite music is, it's not the music so much as it is the composer's attitude. We had a piece called Concerto for Orchestra by Donald Erb, and he had written this for the Chicago Symphony. And every section or soloist, you know, principal, had some kind of major cadenza in this piece. So he had this way up the stratosphere, and I'd worked it out and knew my whole philosophy for practicing is to do something 3 times perfect. Then I stop. Then I make a new little contract with myself and also rest. I'm going to play it 3 more times perfectly, and then I stop. Then I do it 3 more times. So obviously, some pieces are technically difficult, so difficult, I have to start very, very, very slowly. Then I keep moving the metronome up a little bit. Well, Donald's piece was one of these. Well, the Chicago Symphony played it. They were supposed to record it, and they said, no thanks. So somebody contacted Leonard Slatkin, our music director, and said, would you guys like to record it? And unfortunately, Leonard said, oh yeah, we'll do that. So we have the rehearsals, we have the concerts, and we're getting ready to record it. And the day before, I said to Don, I said, anything you want me to do differently in the cadenza? And he said, no, I love it. I love what you're doing, but you know, Bud Hirsch has really struggled with this cadenza. I said, Bud Hirsch is 70 years old. You should have given him a break. I said, oh no, I can't do that. So that attitude really bothered me. Well, then the next day, we're really up in the stratosphere, and he comes to me and says, well, it's fine, but I don't like what you're doing right here. Well, you had your chance yesterday to tell me I'm not doing anything different today. You know, it's what I'm thinking. I said, okay, what do you want? Well, I want you to go faster here. All right. But I'm really angry because, you know, I did my duty of saying I felt my duty as the principal. Are you happy with the cadenza? I didn't need a compliment. If he didn't like something, I didn't want to find out the next day. So I kind of felt a little betrayed. So it's maybe not the music so much as the attitudes of some composers. But, I mean, I know it's their gift to the world, but not all of us are Bud Hirsch. So. And I didn't like it that you said, kind of put Bud down. Bud really struggled. He's 70 years old. Give him a break. I can't do that. No, I can't do that. Oh well.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So before we hop on to take some of your questions in a few minutes, outside of brass, how have you enjoyed spending your time?
I have a brand new passion. It's called pickleball. I really love it. Well, first off, I like it that it's not real hard. It's like, you know what a wiffle ball looks like? Well, that's what they sort of use. Maybe the holes are a different shape or a different size. And then the paddle is bigger than a ping pong paddle, but a little smaller than a racquetball paddle. The court's like 1/3 the size of a tennis court. So it's easy to learn, and I'm meeting new people, so it's kind of, and they're not musicians. So it's kind of nice. We don't have to talk about trumpet or music. And maybe some of these people I'll be able to con into helping with the holiday brass concerts in December as volunteers. So I see it as two ways. One to give me some exercise and just to be able to run around a little bit and get out of the house. Two, maybe I'll find some new volunteers for holiday brass. And if we ever do a conference back in St. Louis, maybe get some volunteers to help with that. And I have to say, volunteers have been outstanding. Lauren's sitting here in the front, our general manager, and this gives her out. This is not an easy job. And the host, our three hosts, it's not an easy job to put on a conference. Lots and lots and lots of details. And I've told soloists in the past who, like, they got out here and the piano wasn't in the right position, or the rehearsal time was late, somebody went over or whatever, and I said, or it was double booked, okay? Nobody is trying to undermine what you're trying to do here. It's just human error. And we really want you to succeed, and we'll take care of this. Just be calm, and we'll take care of this. It'll be all right. So Lauren has this ability, and we greatly appreciate you.
Amazing. Well, we're going to take just 2 minutes. We're going to just take some time off the stage. If you have some questions that you would like to ask to Susan, jump onto our Instagram. It'll be in our stories at Boulders Brass Podcast, and then we've got 10 minutes or so to get to as many of your questions as we can. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. Amazing. Thank you very much for sending in some questions for us. We haven't got very long, and I'm very conscious of making sure we don't overrun. I don't want to be that person just because we all have lots of really cool questions. So I'm going to get through as many as I can. Please don't come and find me and hunt me down if I don't get to your question. We have a time limit. It's not my fault. Okay, so where's the first one? Did you ever feel threatened by other women doing the same work as you?
Did I ever feel threatened by other women?
Doing the same job as you. Doing the same work as you.
Same work. Oh, well, I'm not threatened, but I felt like they felt threatened by me. Do you all know the name Fortis Rebecca? French horn player, the Oslo Symphony, Norway. She was very vocal back in 1992 when she heard we were organizing a holiday brass, organizing IWBC. And she saw no reason to have that. And I kept her letters and sent them to Jan for the archive. But I thought it was kind of interesting because she really didn't want anything to do with us. And she felt like, after all, we don't have a male harp club or a male or a female harp or a female piano this or, that, rightfully, you're just playing your instrument and that's the way it should be. But I also wondered if she wanted all the attention to be, how you psychologically try to figure out where's she coming from. And so that was it. She didn't want attention taken away from her. And that's the only thing I felt once in a while is women were the only woman in the brass section, and suddenly there were 2 women in the brass section. I'm not going to compete with you for any attention. I just want to play my instrument. And that may or may not be the attitude of the other person. But Jennifer Montone was the second woman in the brass section. She's now principal in the Philadelphia Orchestra. Now we have, of course, Karen Lipsnick became principal after I was principal. Trumpet. There are 3 women in the horn section now. And Amanda Stuart, there we go, is associate principal trombone. So now there's several women in the St. Louis Symphony brass section. We always have a screen up, and they do take it down for the finals. But obviously, they know that women can do the job, and if you play the best, they do pick you. So, that answer your question?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. You're good. You're good. Amazing. So, next one. What are you especially excited to see happen in the future of music?
I'd rather say in the future of the IWBC, but
you can answer both.
Future of music. I don't know. Composers just throw notes together to have sound, just a particular sound. I mean, sometimes it seems so disorganized to me. So I tend to lean towards things that have a little bit more melody, and but that's just my own personal taste. For the IWBC, we're planning on going to Japan in 2024, but we're planning on it. We haven't put any deposits down yet, but that deadline is coming up where we'll make that final decision. But we're very happy. Kana Matarama is in the audience back there. Kana started coming in 2006 to the IWBC. Three? Thank you so much, Sherry. Excellent. But 2003 she came. I think one or two students came with her, but she got here and did not speak any English. I know she understood some English, but not speaking any English. So she hired a translator. First off, to me, that takes a lot of courage to go to a foreign country and not speak any of the language. And secondly, she was smart enough to hire a translator. So she's a very smart woman. Then she came in 2006, and then 2010, and every time she's come. She's on the board of directors now. A couple of years ago, she stopped hiring a translator, or bringing a translator, and started speaking for herself. And if you were at her recital yesterday, she talked and talked and talked. I thought she'd never shut up. That was meant as a joke. Okay. With different cultures, sometimes I put my foot in my mouth. So I'm very excited because when she started feeling comfortable, I said, "Oh, why don't you introduce one of the sessions?" You know, "Oh, I don't know." And I said, "Really? You just need to say the person's name. Please welcome them as they give a presentation." And she signed up for 5. So I'm most impressed with Kana, and she's brought a person with her who's going to help organize the conference, and that's smart. So you see, very intelligent woman, very brave, and is ready to take on the world. And I think it's going to be a super, super conference over in Japan. I look forward to hoping that my health continues to be good and that I can attend. But if not, I will be there in spirit. So thank you, Kana, for inviting us to Japan.
Brilliant. I think we have time for just one more question. So I'm intrigued by this one. It's a great question. Who is your idol?
Well, this is a little challenging. But as a kid, when I started hearing the Chicago Symphony with Fritz Reiner as a music director, I loved the brass section. So of course, I wanted to be like Bud Herseth. Nowadays, it might have been if I'd known about Marie, or if I'd known about Barbara Butler or some others when I was younger, it might have been them that would have been my idol. Personally, as a Christian, and I hope you know that I'm not one of those who would stand on the side of the road with a sign that says, you know, you're going to hell, or something like that. But I believe in those principles, so I'm a follower of those principles. And I don't know, I really look back at my teacher, Herbert Mueller, And, again, they gave me an opportunity at IU to develop as a player. Mr. Adams, I studied with him for one semester when my teacher, Mr. Mueller, was on sabbatical, and I went to orchestra, and his student was playing first. I didn't care, I just liked being in the orchestra, so I was playing second. I had my lesson with Mr. Adams. Very next orchestra rehearsal, I go, and Larry's sitting in the second chair, and he says, "Oh, didn't you see the sign? You're playing first now." I said, "Are you okay with that?" And I said, I didn't ask for that. And he says, "No, Mr. Adams told me you're a much better player than I am." Okay, so they made sure that I had opportunities to play. I proved myself, so I got more opportunities. So always be prepared, and when you go into a gig, don't just blow it out because it's a church job. Look at the music. Make sure you've got everything nailed down, even if it's just whole notes. I practice the whole notes. So, mostly because I'm going to have to make sure I have the endurance now to play the whole notes. But anyway, I guess I put up the first maestro that hired me. Serge Fournier was the music director in Toledo Symphony. He did not have a good way of communicating with people. I won't go there. Walter Susskind hired me in the St. Louis Symphony. Leonard Steichen was the assistant conductor. The only time I worried for my job is when we had a European conductor come. They're not used to women being in the brass section. So the first was Jerzy Simkov. The second trumpet was our librarian. And so he calls Roger into the office. He said, "We're playing Mahler or Symphony No. 1. I said, "Roger, you and that girl, you're like this on that second movement." So he was complimenting me through Roger. And then, of course, Leonard Slackton became music director, and our last music directors that I had was David Robertson. So for the St. Louis area, it seems like American conductors do better in St. Louis, and I don't think that we've had any European conductors that have done as well. That's not to say they're not great conductors. They're just not very good with our donors, especially Jerzy Simkov. He'd go to a donor party and grab a musician, go in the corner and say, "I don't know these people. Talk to me." Well, you wouldn't go get much money out of him if he did that. So anyway, I don't know if that answers your question, but really Bud Herson, I guess, was my idol for learning the trumpet and the way to play.
Well, I don't know about you. I could sit here and ask more questions of Susan for hours and hours and hours, but we will get ourselves in a lot of trouble if we do that. So we do have to wrap up. Thank you to everybody that's come to listen to the live episode of Baldur's Brass Podcast. Thank you, IWBC, for inviting me. Thank you so much, Susan, for agreeing to take part. It's been an absolute honour. Susan Slaughter, everyone.